Last moments on Everest, 1996 Everest disaster. Everest disaster is a series of events that occurred on the 10th to the 11th of May, 1996. Bad weather triggered a blizzard that caused the death of 8 people, holding them hostage on the high mountains. It's one of the most significant losses of life in the history of mountain climbers in history, which happened in a single day. Extreme weather conditions, coupled with the bad decisions, climbers with little experience coupled with delays, led to the 1996 Everest disaster. The climbers who set out on that fateful day were divided into groups. One group was led by Rob Hall, which belongs to adventure consultants, including Mike Groom and Andy Harris. Scott Fisher led the other group and guides, Anatoly Bukreev, Neil Beadleman, who belonged to the Mountain of Madness group. Expeditions were organized by Indo-Tibetan police, including Taiwanese team. Rob Hall's group consisted of 7 climbing Sherpas, natives of eastern Nepal, plus 8 clients. Scott Fisher's group consisted of 8 climbing Sherpas, natives of eastern Nepal, plus 7 clients. These natives have experience climbing high mountains and altitudes. Most earn a living as assistants during climbing expeditions. Another group consisted of American filmmaker David Brashear, who was on Everest making an IMAX movie. Both groups had public figures at the time, which included Sandhill Pittman, journalist on Scott Fisher's group, and Krakauer, who was on assignment for The Outside magazine. Including another group from India who climbed from the Tibetan part of Everest, came for numerous expeditions. Events that led to the 1996 Everest disaster. Overcrowding and big business on Everest at the time. In 1996, getting to the summit of Everest was a big business that turned into a multi-billion-dollar business. Plenty of companies had positioned themselves as the main people to help amateur climbers make their dreams of getting to the summit of Everest. Each customers were charged $30,000 to $65,000. Too much crowding and over-commercialization would lead to the disaster of 1996. Gearing up for the climb. Before climbing the mountain, climbers try to acclimatize themselves to the environment, climbing higher altitudes, then returning to their main base. Within this period, the climbers made their way to the top of the mountains. The climbers got past numerous camps, from Camp 1 to Camp 2 and Camp 3. May 9th, the day the climbers were set for Camp 4, something terrible happened. Chen Yunan, one member of the Taiwan group, made a very costly mistake that would later lead to his death. He went outside of his tent to relieve himself without wearing his boots. He lost his footing and slipped 80 feet into an abyss. He was quickly retrieved from the abyss by the Sherpas available at the time of the incident. Chen Yuan later died of internal injuries sustained from the fall. He was the very first casualty of the catastrophic events on Everest in 1996. The climbing to Camp 4 ensued, and they made it to the camp. Few of the climbers needed oxygen to survive at the time because of the high altitude, which had extreme effects on their body. Most of the climbers from the various expeditions made it to Camp 4. They encountered a severe storm that delayed their plans of climbing in the night as they had planned. The storm lasted a few hours, but later stopped at exactly 7:30 p.m. on May 9th. They proceeded with their plans for climbing in the night. They had on them headlamps and bottled oxygens. Total number of climbers were 33, including the various consultants. Each of them had 2 spare bottles of oxygen, which was expected to finish at 5 p.m. They were required to come down quickly once they have reached the summit. Speed was essential, but some bad decisions hampered their speed. Both group leaders of the expeditions had instructed one Sherpa from each group. They were expected to go ahead of other climbers and set the ropes they were leading to the summit. The 2 Sherpas were Lapsang Jangbu of the Mountain of Madness group and Anj Dorji of Adventure Consultants. Failure of Lapsang Jangbu to help and assist Anj Dorji with the ropes was one of the leading causes of the series of events that led to the death of 8 climbers on that day. As a result, on the ropes not set, climbers set towards the summit, which slowed them down. Summit slowdowns. Despite the bottleneck resulting from the ropes, which took time to set, most of the climbers were also slow due to lack of experience. Few of the climbers who were waiting in the queue got worried due to the quantity of oxygen they had on them. They were worried about how they will get to the summit and get back down before their oxygen finish. More bottlenecks occurred on the way to the summit, which slowed them down further. All expedition leaders had earlier agreed to meet at about 2 p.m. Turnaround time agreed even if any one of the climber didn't make it to the summit yet. By 11:30 a.m, storm was starting to surface. 3 men on Rob Hall's team knowingly full well they wouldn't make it to the summit before the stipulated time turned around. This decision by the men was one of the best decisions taken that day. In the first group, some climbers made it to the summit, celebrated, and headed back down as a result of oxygen supplies, which was reducing at an alarming rate. Other climbers have been summiting even after the stipulated turnaround time of 2 p.m. The leader of Mountain Madness Group, Scott Fisher, allowed his clients to stay on the summit past the turnaround time till past 3 p.m. Despite his clients going down, Fisher, on the other hand, was summiting. He wasn't questioned because of his experiences in mountain climbing and being the leader. His assistant, Anatoly Bukreev, had summited and descended back to Camp 4 alone, not helping out any clients. On the other hand, Rob Hall didn't adhere to the turnaround time. Instead, he tried helping Doug Jansen summit. Jansen had earlier tried to summit the previous year but failed. Reason, Rob wanted to help him summit. 3:30 p.m. Storms had started to get fierce. Snow began to cover the paths that would guide them on their way down. Blizzards start to form, combined with winds when most climbers are finding their way down the mountain. As the storm increased, 17 of the climbers were stranded high up in the mountains. The winds were heavy, darkness was starting to come, and most of the climbers' oxygen ran out. Group of climbers led by guides Beeldman groom descended the mountains. Along with them were fellow climbers Yasuko Namba, Sandy Pittman, Charlotte Fox, Leen Gam Melgaard, Martin Adams, including Clev Schuning. On their way down, they met Rob Hall's client Beck Weathers. He was stranded as a result of blindness caused by the enraging storm. Nevertheless, he joined the group on their way down. They managed to reach within 200 feet of Camp 4 despite extreme, but couldn't see clearly. By midnight, the weather had cleared, briefly. They made their way to the camp, but 4 out of the group were unable to move. Weathers, Namba, Pittman, the Fox couldn't run. The others made it to the field and provided for immediate assistance. Anatoly Bukreev did try to help Fox and Pittman. He was unable to help Fox and Namba as a result of the poor weather. He left them behind as a result. The death of the climbers. Rob Hall and Doug Hansen were stranded at the top of Everest. Rob didn't want to leave Hansen behind as he was unable to go on. Trying to bring Hansen down, Hall lost focus for a moment, but looked back only to find Hansen missing, meaning he had fallen off. Rob Hall kept contact with the base camp radio all through the night. He spoke to the pregnant wife at the time. Guide Andy Harris was in the storm, had a radio on, and heard Rob's transmissions. He tried bringing oxygen to Rob Hall and got lost on the way, never seen again. On the morning of May 11th, Scott Fisher and fellow climber Makalu Gao were seen 1,200 feet above Camp 4. Fisher was hardly breathing at the time they were found. The Sherpas left Fisher there as they believed he had no hope, but Bukreev climbed up to him, only to find him dead. Gao was in a terrible shape. The cold caused him severe frostbite. The Sherp assisted him as he could barely work. May 11th, rescuers tried getting to Rob Hall, but the weathered conditions were too bad. They had to suspend the rescue mission. Bree Shears and IMAX team found Rob Hall's body at the south summit 12 days later. Some climbers survived, but ended up with severe damage to the fingers and arms as a result of frostbite. Beckweather and Gao got injuries to the fingers and arms, but survived. The total number of deaths rose to 8 people on that fateful day. Both leaders of the expeditions, Rob Hall, Scott Fisher, died on the mountain. Rob Hall's guide, Andy Harris, 2 of his clients, Doug Hansen and Yasuko Namba, all died. On the other side of the mountain, Tibetan, Tsiwang Small, Dorji Morup, Tsiwang Paljor died in the extreme harsh storm. the highest death toll ever recorded in a day in mountain climbing history.